This week on The Futurists, Per Sjofors.
I really think and I really hope that the next administration will take a much stronger anti-monopolistic position and really try to break up these very, very, very strong and very powerful monopolies that exist today.
Hey there, welcome to The Futurists. I'm Rob Tursik, and this week we're talking about the cost of living and prices. It seems like everybody's complaining these days about affordability. It's become a political issue. The challenge has been that since the pandemic, we've all experienced inflation, and for many people, it's the first time in their lives that they've experienced inflation. And people are shocked to find that their salary hasn't gone up that much, but the prices in the grocery store go in one direction. Today, I've got an expert on the show who's going to help us with this, Per Sjofors, someone I've known for a number of years, but we haven't been on the show before. Per, welcome, and welcome to the show at The Futurists.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, me too. I've been wanting to talk to you for quite some time. As you know, I've been sending you questions and emails and so forth as things cross my radar. I start to wonder about them, and I think, gee, when it comes to pricing, I know a pricing expert. So, Per, tell us a little bit about what you do as a pricing expert. Sometimes you're called the price whisperer. Explain that to me.
Yeah, if nothing else, because I got a weird name, I adopted the moniker when somebody told me, "Oh, you are the price whisperer," and I said, "That's a good idea." And I've been doing pricing now for roughly 20 years, and it's all the methodology is all based on my experience running companies, which is what I've done. Mm-hmm. And in those companies, we did experiments with pricing. Some of those experiments were very successful. Others were complete duds. And what I'd learned in business school about pricing was too theoretical and academic, mm-hmm. and not very much of it. So when it was time for me to start out on my own, I developed a process to make every pricing experiment a success.
So you advise companies on their pricing. So there'll be a company that says, gee, we're not quite sure how to price this product. And you help them devise a methodology for sounding out the market and coming up with a price that makes sense.
Well, it's actually, the process is about doing a particular kind of online market research that I call value research. Mm-hmm. And if you can, which is possible to do using the AI that we developed, proprietary AI that we developed and methodology, it is possible to predict sales volume and revenue at precise price points. And when you have that information, out goes guessing. And you can actually set your prices in such a way that is the optimum, give the company the optimum results.
Okay, so let me give you an example. We can talk through how that might work. So in the past couple of years, I've been involved with 2 startup companies. And like many startup companies, when we finally figured out our product and got to a point where okay, we're ready for customers, we had a big internal debate about how to price it. And there's a range of ideas, right? And so, there's a bunch of different ways to try to figure that out, but it is a guessing game, right? You're coming up with, you can take your actual cost and then try to, add some margin on top of it, or you can try to look at competitive products and sort of work your way backwards and say, gee, how do we price competitively and make our product attractive in this market? But what I've been told consistently throughout my career is startup companies typically underprice. They price their products too low. How do you feel about that?
They do. They absolutely do. And it was kind of interesting. I was at CES last week and leading up to CES and at the show and a few conversations after the show, I went around and I asked people, how do you set your pricing? And I did 64 interviews, and out of those 64, 62 used the methodology that you mentioned.
So they basically look at what the competitors are doing and they say we're going to price it accordingly.
Yeah, exactly, and that is a proven way to leave money on the table.
It's
And
also it's kind of like the consumer's approach, right? So a consumer will look, that's how people shop, right? I think it's kind of intuitive for someone to say, well, gee, I'm going to price the way I shop. So when I go to the store, I look at three different products. They're all kind of in the same price range. One's a little bit higher. Maybe it's a better brand or better quality, a perception of quality. Maybe there's a generic version and it's a few cents or dollars less. And maybe I'll be, if my budget doesn't permit the other one, I'll go for that or something. So I think that that's kind of an intuitive pricing strategy because it's the way we shop. But what you're saying is that that's the wrong way to do it.
yeah, absolutely, and especially when you bring out something that is innovative. This works if you bring out another commodity product, because commodity products are sold on price alone, and whoever have the lowest price gets the business because the product is the same as all other products. But innovative products are sold only to innovators and early adopters. And those innovators, this of course varies with market, but innovators typically make up about 2.5% of a marketplace, and early adopters make up another 7 or so percent, give or take a percent here and there. And neither of those are price sensitive.
Ah,
They buy for all different reasons. They they want to make themselves proud because they have the newest technology.
they want to try a new
They will,
thing. That's me. Like I'm always interested in the new stuff. I'll buy it. I'm
that's
not that
right.
price
Yeah,
sensitive when I'm trying something new.
and 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 then you have these companies that come out with new innovative products. They spent oodles of money on product development and on marketing and all different things, and then they price themselves as a commodity.
Hmm.
That's insane, you
And why
know.
do you think that happens, though? Do you think it's a marketing department problem, like, or do you think it's a finance department problem? Who in the company is responsible for making that decision?
Um, the issue is simply they don't know there is a better way,
Hmm.
because again,
That's what creates a market for your service. Then you can come
that's
to them
right.
and
You
say,
can
"Look,
say that.
you're going to miss the
Um,
market completely because you're leaving money on the table." For a startup, this is essential, right? Because if they get the pricing right, it can be the difference between success and failure for a startup company. But I
Definitely.
guess that would also be true for a new product launch as well. How about, though, in a commodity market where there's already a well-established expectation of price, is it possible for a company to come out and say, well, we've done something new, different, better, we've enhanced it, and therefore it's going to cost more money? And companies attempt to do that all
Yeah,
the time.
there's always ways to differentiate yourself.
Mhm.
Always. Now, if your product is a commodity, that differentiation may not be huge, but it's something. I mean, look at how the various gas companies try to convince you, the consumer, that because I have this additive with some fancy name,
Yeah.
I can charge another 15 cents.
Yeah, like Chevron has Techron. I have no idea what Techron is, but it's been burned into my brain because I see
No,
it every time I go to the gas station.
I think I know what it is. They actually put in 15% Texaco.
Okay. Okay, so companies try different things to make the point that their product has some extra value, and that's how they can justify the extra price. Um, Tell me about your methodology then. So how would you help a company understand how to achieve a better price? And does it work?
Well, first of all, price does not live in a vacuum.
Hmm.
Everything you do in a company affects your ability to price. And that means that, and I can give you examples here, but
Hmm.
your marketing messages drives differences in willingness to pay, and that directly affects how you can price. Same with your marketing channels, same with the feature functions that you promote, same with your sales methodologies and your sales channels, if you do that,
Hmm.
if you have channels. And the way you monetize your product also affects willingness to pay and therefore price. And let me give you two examples. There's one company sells. They have these dispensers for filtered water outside grocery stores and places like that. And they came to us and said, "We tried to increase our price 7 years ago, and it backfired, so we had to revert. Now we need to increase our prices, and we need to do it right." And what we found was that if they position themselves differently from a purely marketing standpoint, there were room to increase price.
Hmm.
Now, marketing for a company like that is essentially the signage on the dispenser.
Hmm.
So during 1 week, they changed prices and they changed the signage, and they grew from a $200 to $240 million company.
Oh, okay. So it worked. It was a successful rebranding.
Absolutely.
Okay, so your advice goes beyond just saying, here's the best price. You're actually going to recommend strategies for
Oh,
presenting
definitely.
that price to customers and ensuring that they don't reject it or shop elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so since the pandemic, there has been a lot of inflation. And yet the inflation, we usually attribute it first to supply chain shock from the pandemic, when goods were hard to get and the supply chains were somewhat disrupted. So that's where we first began to see signs of inflation. Things are back to normal now, but prices are still rising. So we still are experiencing inflation. Depending on the month, it can vary from somewhere around 3% to 5%. But generally speaking, most Western nations are still experiencing inflation. And that may be the case in other countries as well that I'm not aware of. This is what's curious to me. I'm trying to understand better. So a moment ago, you said to me that companies typically underprice, or they would have a tendency to underprice. But what I'm experiencing when I go to the store, when I shop, is quite the opposite. What I'm experiencing is prices are only going in one direction. They're going up, and nothing's getting cheaper.
Mhm.
Grocery stores across the board have raised prices since the pandemic. With things I would consider to be a commodity food, like Pepsi Cola, soft drinks, have increased their prices by double digits since the pandemic. Healthcare costs are extraordinarily high, and they're going higher. There doesn't seem to be any limit on the healthcare costs. Automobile pricing has surged, particularly since the advent of electric vehicles, right? So this
Mhm.
has kind of shifted the perception of cars. Part of that is that they don't make economy cars, and there are very few economy cars left as an option. So automakers have just presented us with these luxury options, priced accordingly. And the list goes on and on and on. Now, one of the reasons for that, as I understand it, is market consolidation. In the United
Mhm.
States, we typically have four or fewer major corporations that dominate every industrial sector, whether that's food or pharmaceuticals or healthcare or transportation or airlines, banking, you name it. From industry to industry, there are usually four national brands. And those companies are very competitive with each other, but they all converge on a set of prices, and it's very difficult to find an alternative. So you're kind of stuck. I'm going to hesitate to say that there's price fixing. That's clearly illegal.
Yes.
But when there's only three competitors to your company, there's only four companies playing in a category. It's also not very hard for them to arrive magically at the same price or very similar prices. In addition, we've seen a wave of junk fees. We've seen additional fees piled on. The example I would use, because I just experienced this myself, you're shopping for a hotel,
Hmm.
right? So, of course, you're going to do that online. It used to be something you did with a travel agent who would find it for you. And now it's changed. So in the last 20 years, everyone's shifted their behavior to shopping for themselves for hotel rooms and booking themselves. And typically we look at the room night price and we don't really delve any further into what the other transaction costs might be. Sometimes those aren't very clearly or explicitly presented to us. And so when you check into the hotel, you find out that, yes, there's the price you prepaid when you bought it, say on Travelocity or hotels.com. But that's just the room night cost. There's also an additional resort fee or some other fee that's tacked on, and that could be $30 or $40 a day. I find this infuriating because you think you have a budget, you think you've got a deal, and then when you get to the place, it's like, haha, surprise, we just tacked on an extra 30% to the cost or 20% to the cost that you didn't expect. Those are junk fees. Now, the government has been railing against this for years. And in the Biden administration, they were very diligently trying to use the FTC to bring cases against people for these junk fees. Some of those measures have been struck down in court, and some of those measures simply aren't enforced. Tell me a
Hmm.
little bit about junk fees. So how did this arise? When did it arise? Who's doing it? Why do we have to pay them?
Well, I think specifically when it comes to hotels, these resort fees are, I guess, specifically for Vegas, where it could be as high as 85, almost $100 a day
Hmm.
for some hotels,
I mean,
and
look, it started in Vegas. That's true, but that's not now. It's New York. In any city, any major city you go to, they charge a resort fee, and candidly, it's bullshit, right? The resort fee is access to the gym and Wi-Fi. That's what they're charging you for. Well, those are things that should come with, right?
yeah, it's just a way of in a commodity market is a way of increasing price, and because again, in a commodity market, lowest price win, and and the way it works for us, is all about pricing psychology, because we as consumers, we compare the price. We don't compare the total cost. And obviously airlines are experts on this.
Yeah.
And I've actually taken the effort to, if you add up all the various junk fees in one of these ultra low cost airlines with one of the legacy carriers, you end up paying the same amount.
Yeah. For a much more uncomfortable flight.
That's right.
It's
And
true. So, like a cheap airline or a discount airline, they're going to charge you for carry-on bag. They're going to charge you for, getting boarding early. They're going to charge you for selecting a seat. They're going to charge you extra for an aisle seat or a so-called preferred seat. Not that there are any really in economy class. And when you add up all those fees, it ends up costing the ticket price. You might as well have purchased your flight on a regular mainstream airline like United or American. There's just
yep.
not that much difference. So that's deceptive pricing.
Yeah,
Now,
and the reason that it works
mhm.
is something that, there's a guy called, Robert Thaler. He got the Nobel Prize in economics 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. And one of the things that he discovered is that we have in our brains, we have different compartments, for different, for different prices, basically. And so there is a compartment for ticket price, right? And then there's other compartments for junk fees,
Mm.
and we say to ourselves, "Oh, I got such a deal. This was so low price," and we just don't add them up,
Hmm.
right? And that's there's another example of this. I don't know if you remember, but way back when, maybe 15 years ago, American Airlines came out with this, premium economy.
Mhm.
Same uncomfortable seat, another 3 or 5 inches of legroom. That was the only difference, and it was sold at a premium price.
Mhm.
Nobody bought it.
Hmm.
So after about 9 months, they took it away. Now, 2 years later, United came up with the same idea,
Mhm.
but with one big difference.
Hmm.
You couldn't buy that premium economy when you actually bought the ticket. You could only buy it as an upgrade when you checked in.
Uh,
And it was very successful. Now, things have moved on since then.
mhm.
This may be a little different today, and I think today premium economy actually makes a little more difference than just a bit of legroom. But
Yeah, but you're still in the main cabin with economy class. You're right. You get 2 inches of legroom, maybe. Um, it's not. It's not a significant upgrade, but you're right. I've actually paid those fees to get a little bit more legroom because I'm tall and I want to
yeah,
be comfort. So if I
yeah.
can afford to do it, I'll do it.
But
So that's about the psychology of pricing. And what you're saying is once people commit to a price, once they fix on a certain price, That's lodged in their head, and then they think of those junk fees as somehow some additional price. They can rationalize it to themselves after they've committed to the main ticket price.
Yeah, that's
So they're
right.
really preying, the companies are preying on our psychology, or let's say a cognitive blind spot in our psychology, where we can't rationally understand the total impact of the price.
But there's been other spectacular failures.
Hmm.
Um, about a year ago, um, uh, Audi offered people to buy a subscription to heated seats, right?
Yes,
And obviously the heated seats were already
they're in the
installed
car.
in the car, and it created a public relationship disaster.
Yeah, and
And
they
it,
did
it
that.
was,
And they did that in
it was
response to
really cheap.
Tesla,
It
right?
was. I'm sorry.
They did that in response to Tesla because Tesla had done the same thing with autopilot. Autopilot's built into all the Tesla vehicles. You're paying an extra fee just to turn that feature on, right? So
Mhm.
it could be included for free. I don't know if they can still get away with that these days, but at the time, they were cranking up the cost of autopilot. So I think other automakers were thinking, gee, where else can we do junk fees? Where can we basically treat it like an airline? It's like, okay, you bought the car, but now if you want the luxury features, you're going to have to pay to turn them on, to activate them.
But
So,
this is airlines and hotels manage to get away with this because they're so commoditized, whereas cars is is nowhere near as commoditized.
hmm,
They kind of all look the same by now, but in fact they are different. They ride differently. They have different features. The interiors are different, and so forth. And likewise, you and we talked about this. You buy a car not only to go from A to B. You buy a car because you want to project something to, or at least many people do. You want to project something of success or practicality or whatever to the
right.
outside world.
So that's the marketing, right? These companies spend enormous amounts of money on marketing. Half the amount of the like 50% of the cost can be marketing. Actually, if when it's a soft drink, it's 75% of the cost of the
Yeah, I
price
can be.
is marketing, right? So you're buying a perception, and like you say, you're buying a persona that you want to opt
Yes.
into as a consumer. So again, we're back to psychology. So in both cases, you've just mentioned two things where they kind of play to or prey upon human psychology. Let me offer one more, though. There's a concept of trust, and we
Mhm.
have to trust the companies whose products we buy. And I don't think we think about this consciously enough. Sure, with an automobile, safety is a factor, right? Airline safety is a factor. You don't want to get injured or something. But generally speaking, we don't think about trust too much, too consciously when we're purchasing things. If the pricing feels squirrely to us, if we make the purchase and then later we realize, gosh, that was a bad deal that I did. They nickeled and dined me with additional fees. I don't know if these companies understand how much that destroys trust. I personally will not go to a hotel ever again when they have junk fees, and I'm never even going to look at it. So if they change their prices, let's say they go to transparency or fixed prices, I'm never going to know about it because I will never visit that hotel, never set foot in their premises again. I'm not sure how many travelers act that way, but from my standpoint, once you've broken trust, it's going to be hard to regain. And some companies understand this very well. One of the companies that understands it very, very well is Amazon. Jeff Bezos has written eloquently about building trust and building transparency. But Amazon uses dynamic pricing. For
Yes.
instance, I've been told, I don't know this for sure, but I've been told that if you're using a Macintosh computer, you're going to see prices that are 5% higher on Amazon because they know that you're probably someone who can afford to pay a little bit more money.
Hmm.
I've also been told that the cost of shipping is already built into the markup of the product so that when you're browsing Amazon and you've got, say, Amazon Prime, you've paid for that service, so you get free shipping. That's actually not really a great value because the cost of shipping is already baked into the price. What do you know about Amazon and dynamic pricing, where they present different prices to different customers?
Well, um, dynamic within the pricing community, dynamic pricing is is supposed to be one of the sort of silver bullets for pricing.
Hmm.
And again, airlines and hotels and car rental companies get away with it, but it has been tried in other areas. For example, one of the fast food companies started with dynamic pricing, and it backfired so badly because customers came back. They expected the consistency in their meal and consistency in pricing. And they took it away after only a couple of weeks because of the public relations disaster that it became. Right?
Okay, that's in that example, but we certainly have many cases where junk fees persist and they're
Well,
almost
junk
impossible
fees,
to get rid
yes,
of.
but dynamic pricing, the
Oh, well, tell me about the distinction between.
dynamic pricing was first actually introduced, I think, in 1987 by American Airlines, and the CEO of American Airlines stood up on the shareholder meeting and said, "This is the most important invention in the airline industry since the jet engine," and it gave them about $1.5 billion more in revenue, but it completely destroyed profitability. And dynamic pricing is what led to all American airlines, all American U.S. carriers, except Southwest and Alaska, to go through bankruptcy. Right?
I'm sorry, I'm not getting the connection. So you're saying a change in price led the companies to bankruptcy?
Yeah,
Can you tell
because
me
it took
exactly how that
it didn't
how that
take
happened?
it didn't take passengers very long to understand that if I buy my ticket two weeks ahead or 3 weeks ahead or whatever, I'm paying half the price.
Oh, so consumer behavior changed and then
Yeah,
their revenue went down.
exactly. Yeah.
Got it.
So
Okay, great.
so so and when it comes to Amazon, I think I don't have any particular insights in how Amazon does. I've done actually some tests though. Because I happen to have both. Unfortunately, I also have a PC,
Hmm.
and I see the same prices.
I see.
And I've also done things because when you can do a VPN when you go on a VPN and you look for airline tickets, you could place yourself in some African low GDP country and see if you get different prices. And sometimes you get different prices,
Hmm.
but it's not much. It's $10 or $15. It's not a big deal.
Okay, so the discrepancy there is not as great as we might think.
No.
Here, we're going to take a break. So, folks, we're going to take a little break here. We'll be back in 1 minute with more of the Futurists and Per Sjofors. Hang tight. We'll see you in just 1 minute.
Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurist podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcast, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, and Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show.
Hey, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tursik, and this week I'm talking to Per Sjofors about pricing and the future of pricing. Everybody's highly sensitive to ever-increasing costs and the prospect of continued inflation. This has become a political issue. What I'm trying to do with Per now is dig into how prices are set and some of the techniques that are used to set pricing. Now we want to talk a little bit about the future of pricing. So we were talking before the break about algorithmic pricing and dynamic pricing. Now we have the advent of artificial intelligence. So there's AI that can help us set pricing. You use that yourself in your service when you advise companies on how to optimize their prices. Just recently, there was an investigation by the Federal Trade Authority into Instacart. And Instacart was using an AI service, a company called Eversight that they had acquired. And this company was creating what they called personalized pricing. And the personalized pricing led to really noticeable discrepancies in price. So you could see a variation of up to 23% prices from products that Instacart would pick up for you at places like Safeway, Target, Costco, and Kroger. On average, the price discrepancies were about 13%. So this was sufficient enough for the Federal Trade Authority to investigate and open a case. Now, Instacart has announced they're no longer doing that. So they've abandoned the experiment. But tell me a little bit about this idea that AIs will be studying us and tracking our behavior. We're already cookied. Our browsers are already recognized. So they already know who we are. They know our history of our shopping. How can an AI help a company kind of tailor pricing personally to me and thereby optimize its profit?
Well, this is really an issue of privacy, and it's really called surveillance pricing, and it is to present just like you said, present different people with different prices based on their buying behavior and their expected willingness to pay, and from a pure pricing perspective. I don't think that's bad. From a privacy perspective, I think it's really very bad because companies are using your behavior, your preferences, your purchase history, and all that stuff without your consent, right? Or maybe you clicked consent, down on page 56 of a privacy, agreement, right? And that is unethical in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But you can say that in a way when you're in the Middle Eastern market somewhere and you haggle about the price of something, that is also personal pricing.
Mm-hmm. I was about to ask you about that because that's true. In the old days when you went to the market, they knew you, right? In a village or in a small town, the merchants would know you and they'd know your history and they'd know your family and they would know kind of what you could pay, what the price was for you, right?
Yeah.
That was before we posted prices. But price transparency is a principle of American economy, right? So this is something that government requires. If you go to a store, the prices have to be posted. And actually, barcodes caused some controversy. This is a long time ago, but they caused some controversy because the price at the checkout could be different from what you saw posted on the shelf. And if you didn't remember that, because that's when they got rid of price tags. Price tags as an innovation were very positive. They're pro-consumer, but it's also a way for merchants to say, you can trust us because our price is one price for everybody. It's the same for everybody. The world's changed since then, and the world's changed significantly in this century. Now, today, an example is if you go to a hospital for a procedure, there are no prices. There's no price sheet. There's no way to find out the prices. The prices aren't fixed. They're not published. They're not searchable on the web. I mention this because I happened to go to a hospital in Vancouver for a while. I was living in Canada, and I had an emergency. I injured my leg, and I had to go to a hospital where I had to get an X-ray and an MRI. And I was surprised to see that there was actually a price sheet there, and it said, here's the cost of an X-ray, here's the cost of an MRI, and it's like one price for everybody. It's the same price for everyone. It wasn't necessarily cheap. I'm not suggesting it was super cheap. It was less than a United States hospital, though, because in an American hospital, prices can vary by 1,000-fold. This is astonishing, but whether it's medication or a procedure or some piece of equipment or a prosthetic that you need, the price difference can vary. And there's many reasons for this. First, we have middlemen, insurance companies that are helping negotiate prices. So depending on the insurance that you have, you might get a different price. Then it's complicated by copay, which varies by the plan that you're on with your insurance company. So you might see a different copay than another person and so on. So in a way, we've got, we're kind of back to that merchant in the town that we talked about, that mythical merchant in the village, except now it's a large institution that you depend on for your well-being. It's a hospital. And Americans spend $1.5 trillion a year on hospitals. So this is not an insignificant part of the economy. This is a big chunk of what we spend money on. costs are skyrocketing. This is well documented. The cost of hospital procedures continues to go up way faster than the rate of inflation. And here I would say, what I've read from economists is most U.S. economic theory depends on pricing mechanisms being stable and transparent so that people can understand. This comes from Friedrich Hayek and the Chicago School of Economists. Their price theory is that it's a strong signal to a market, and then consumers can make informed decisions. With respect to hospitals, we simply do not have transparent pricing. Now, the interesting thing is there's actually a law. There's a rule, a federal transparency rule, where hospitals are supposed to post machine-readable prices on their websites so that you could do comparison shopping, for instance. Most hospitals in the U.S. have not complied with that. Most hospitals in the United States simply don't cooperate. They're just ignoring the rule. And the U.S. government's very lax about enforcing that particular rule. But to this day, when you have a hospital situation where you need to go in, you have no idea what you're going to get presented with as a bill at the end. And that is a wide open loophole that allows hospitals to rip customers off.
Well, hospitals are a sort of a special case because you don't really go there. The prices are negotiated between the insurance companies and the hospital. Mm-hmm. It's a different story if you go to some aesthetic clinic to have your Botox done. Mm-hmm. Then they actually have a price list, because otherwise they couldn't sell. But prices of drugs, prices of procedures, and so forth is negotiated by the various insurance companies and the various hospital groups, and I'm not aware of anyone that will go to a hospital for some major procedure without having insurance. Well, if you don't have insurance, you may be on Medicaid or Medicare or whatever,
Oh, there are millions of Americans who do not have insurance, though. So there's a large number of people who don't, and they're at the mercy of these hospitals. And candidly, the hospitals have no mercy. They can charge those people any amount that they wish. Because the other problem you have when you go to a hospital is very typically it's an emergency situation, right? You don't typically go to a hospital, have a normal procedure done. You would go there to an outpatient clinic where you'd have some understanding in advance. Though I recently had a regular procedure done. I just had to get some tests done, and the pricing was completely not transparent. I had no idea what my copay was going to be. And here I am now, months later, I'm still getting bills, and I don't really know what the bills are for or what organization they are or which doctor I'm paying or something. So I'd say there's zero transparency or very little transparency in that particular field. There's something similar happening with drug prices because we have these middlemen, these pharmaceutical benefit management companies. They've all been bought by big insurance companies or healthcare providers, and they manipulate pricing as well. So I guess what I'm saying here is, it seems like the United States is moving in this direction where the federal government, instead of protecting consumers, is now making it possible for oligopolies to set pricing and to manipulate pricing in ways that extract more money from consumers.
Oh, definitely. And like you mentioned prior, when you have a de facto monopoly, the companies try to extract as much profits as they possibly can, there should be I believe there should be limits to how much you can do that, and
there's a very simple solution for the hospital problem, which is that the federal government can mandate maximum prices for procedures and require hospitals to post that information so that now you, as a consumer, you'd be empowered to shop around and consider different hospitals. You'd know in advance what you're likely to pay. But for some reason, we don't have the willingness to do that.
It's also the issue of what does the insurance actually cover. Mm-hmm. And some 10 years ago, My wife had a brain tumor removed, right? And the insurance company came back and says, sorry, it was a experimental procedure, so we don't cover it. And here's a bill for $104,000.
Wow.
Right? You know, so
Yeah, it's kind of a peculiar thing. You have to call. You have to call in advance, right? So this is a very interesting way to purchase anything, a service. You have to call your healthcare provider and get permission to spend money on a procedure before you do it. And the person making that decision about your healthcare is not a doctor or a nurse or a clinician.
right.
It's a bureaucrat in an office. The other peculiarity of just the American insurance system is that we pay for that service. So we pay the salary of the person who's going to deny your claim. That's part of what you're paying for when you have premiums. The solution, obviously, there. If you don't like that, then universal healthcare is the approach, which is what every industrialized nation, aside from the United States, tends to do.
That's right.
But for some reason, the United States doesn't want to go down that route. So
at the end of the day, you either pay for it. It's a zero-sum game. You either pay for it through taxes or you pay for it through insurance.
Yeah.
And
okay, let's talk about another topic here. So consolidation in industry is one of the big drivers. There has been a wave of consolidation. This is not news. This has been going on for years in the United States. In the past, the United States had vigorous antitrust policy. The feeling there was it's not good for consumers or competition to have an industry dominated by a handful of players. But our federal government has backed down from that. We don't seem to be as aggressive about enforcing antitrust policy. There was a period of time when, during the Biden administration, when Lena Khan was the chairwoman of the Federal Trade Commission, and she was quite aggressive, and she had a novel theory about prices and monopolies. In particular, she was very focused on Amazon, which might be one of the reasons why they backed down from dynamic pricing, if they have, because they were under the scrutiny of the federal government. But under the new presidential administration, this kind of enforcement seems to have stepped back. So here's an example of a deal that's coming down the pike, looking very likely to occur. Netflix is about to buy Warner Brothers Studios and Discovery and all their cable channels, or actually all their movie studios, not the cable channels. Mm-hmm. Now, the economics of this deal make no sense. We're talking about an $80 billion acquisition. It'll be by far the biggest acquisition that Netflix has ever done. They're having to borrow money to do it, and their shareholders don't like it. Initially, the stock price took a 20% hit because investors were saying, no, we don't want you to buy that. From a market standpoint, Warner Brothers with HBO Max is one of the few companies that actually challenges Netflix for their service. So they create a very good competitive product, and actually it's profitable. It's one of the few things in the entire Warner Brothers panoply that makes money. So it seems quite obvious to me that this is not a move that Netflix is doing in order to grow the market or anything else. What they're trying to do, it's a rearguard action to preserve their pricing and to maintain essentially a monopolistic control over market. They want to remove a competitor. Yes. We'll probably end up seeing them do some, if the deal goes through, and it looks like it will, we're going to probably see them do some sort of bundling deal where you can get Netflix plus HBO plus whatever else they might offer, just like Disney Plus. So Disney owns Hulu and ESPN, and they're selling a bundle like that. And so effectively we're recreating the cable TV monopoly, but in streaming.
Yeah, correct.
It's worth pointing out Netflix has raised their prices 125% since 2014. So this is a company that does not hesitate to raise prices. What's a little bit different from cable is it's quite easy to unsubscribe from a streaming service. Where back in the days of cable TV, it was very difficult to unsubscribe from cable TV, especially when they were your broadband provider. It was not quite so easy, but most people have wiggled out of that snare. And now they're free to swap services. So there's a lot of people who will sign up for a streaming service for just 1 month, or they'll get a free month or two as a trial. They'll watch it, and then they cancel their subscription. So they have very high churn rates. But this is a situation we see happening in consolidation. It's a very good illustration of it, that we're going to be left with two major streaming platforms, Disney and Netflix, if the Warner Brothers acquisition goes through. Tell me a little bit about that. What do you expect consumer behavior to be like if they acquire Warner Brothers and bundle HBO Max with Netflix?
Well, people hated the cable bundle, and they're going to hate this too. And what's interesting with all this development is that the winner in all of this is YouTube, right? And it's not only that. We have a service we call customer insights mapping, which again AI based and so forth. And we compared the major streaming platforms, and YouTube has a higher degree of satisfied customers than any of the others. They are claimed to have the best user interface. They are claimed to have the best content and the best value for money, right? So the other players, they're up against the wall. They are not going to be able. They can maybe increase prices slightly, but there is not room for the kind of dramatic price increases that you just mentioned. Simply because people will. I mean, people will go elsewhere.
We're already seeing some signs of that. So it seems to me that the ability to attract new subscribers has tapered off, right? So
Yes.
Netflix and Disney have stopped reporting subscriber numbers and new acquisitions of subscribers because the numbers are not favorable to them. So they're shifting the message that they send to the stock market, how to perceive that company, how to understand their revenue. They're basically saying it's no longer about growth. So that says that they've reached the maximum. They sort of saturated the market.
Yes.
There is still churn. People will still churn away. One thing we do know is every time there's a price hike, a lot of people do unsubscribe. It can be millions of people who unsubscribe. So that's no small thing. Obviously, they model that out. So clearly, before they do a price hike, they bake in the concept that they're going to lose a couple million subscribers, and they're okay with that because the remainder will continue to pay, and it must be profitable for them to do so. But by taking a major competitor off the field, they'll pick up a whole bunch of existing subscribers from that service, so they can add to their net subscriber base, kind of amortize cost across that net subscriber base. And no doubt they'll streamline the back office, so they'll cut some cost internally, they'll lay some people off and so on. So that might end up being a better deal. Although, actually, I have not seen an economic analysis of that Netflix Warner Brothers deal that makes sense. It sounds like they're going to end up in a negative position, and that's supported by the fact that the investors don't like it either. They seem to be wise to that. Now, here's an interesting thing that I thought I'd add to that. So here's a marketplace that has lively competition. You pointed out YouTube, and it's true. YouTube has outstripped any other media service in terms of growth. YouTube today is bigger in terms of views and revenue than U.S. broadcasting, all of television. So it's a gigantic juggernaut. It grows and grows and grows because of these pricing games. But you might not know that there are hundreds of other streaming services. So this is the part that I always find interesting. There are about 800 streaming services in the United States, and there are about 3,000 companies that participate in that market. So it is an industry that has a lot of competition, and there are actually a lot of free services, and those do seem to be growing very quickly. But somehow we focus on these major companies that have the leading position, even though there are a lot of options available. I don't know if that's an audience or customer understanding problem, like if they maybe don't know about those other options, or if it's just lassitude and inertia. People settle into a subscription and they keep going.
I don't have the answer, but I can speculate that it's simply lack of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Give me a forecast. Let's talk about the road ahead. So, I've mentioned already that the federal government doesn't seem to be enforcing antitrust policy. They don't seem to be focused on prices. They're willing to let companies gouge customers. We've seen evidence of that in grocery stores. Grocery prices have increased 9% since 2006. So going back about 20 years, they're just, every year about a half a percentage point on average increase. And that's across all the grocery stores in the U.S. That's driving inflation that hits us right in the pocketbook.
Definitely.
Cost of electricity is skyrocketing. The cost of gasoline is high. So across the board, we see prices going up. What is your forecast then? What do you think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Will prices stabilize? Are we going to continue to be in an inflationary environment? Will companies continue to find new ways to add junk fees?
I think that based on all the conversations I have with companies on pricing, is that yes, they want to increase prices, they want to increase profitability, but at the same time, at least the people I talk to, they say they come to us and they say, we deliver something of value to our clients, and that value comes from the profitability that we gain, and if we can increase our profitability, we can provide more value to more customers. So they have they see that there and this is Warren Buffett said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. So they, at least the people I speak to, they see clearly the relationship between profit and ability to give value to customers. I see very little of interest, if you want, in any price gouging or anything like that.
Oh, so your experience, companies are not seeking to gouge customers. But
No,
I've given you some examples where I think that's evidently happening.
I'm sorry?
So I've given you a few examples in this conversation where I see evidence.
Absolutely, and these are examples where you have near monopolies, and I really think, and I really hope that the next administration will take a much stronger anti-monopolistic position, and really try to break up these very, very, very strong and very powerful monopolies that exist today.
Okay, well, on that note, I think it's time for us to bring the show to a close. Now, Per, you have a book, a holistic pricing guide, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Well, this is how it looks.
Okay, The Holistic Approach to Pricing Power by Per Sjofors.
And pricing power is the ability to increase prices, increase sales volume, and increase customer satisfaction all at the same time. And
Cool. Where can people learn more about you, and where can they find your book?
the book is on Amazon,
Okay.
and it's also Audible for those who listen to books.
Okay.
And the easiest way to find me is Google The Price Whisperer. You should get
Price Whisperer. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, folks, we've been listening to Per Sjofors, and for people who are listening, that's PER, and the last name is Sjofors, and you can find his book, The Holistic Approach to Pricing Power, on Amazon and other booksellers.
Yep.
Let's not just support the monopolistic bookseller. Let's talk about all of them. Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining us this week and talking about the future of pricing power and consolidation and monopolization and so forth. We'll be back next week with another person who is thinking about shaping and influencing the future. I'm Rob Tercek, and I will see you in the future.
Well, that's it for The Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.